Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, remember how I told you, we were going to finish up this ending? It looks a little bit complicated, right? Black has these passed pawns ready to roll, but at the same time we need to prevent white from coming down here, right? So it's still very complicated. What both opponents have done is I played g3, or no, Anthon2010 played g3 to give the king some breathing room, and I played h6 to give this king some breathing room. So here, I briefly thought about what happens if our friend Anthon2010 plays knight h4. I think I remember saying to myself, I think I'm going to give up that pawn because I need to prioritize the pushing of my pass pawn. So that's my thought. If white played knight h4, I'd just start ringing the pawn down. But knight e1 came, and to be honest, I didn't see exactly where the knight was going. But then I saw g2 and e3, and initially I was sort of scared. I said that's a really smart move. But then I said I don't need to worry about it right now. I'm going to play a5. And then on the next move, I'm going to play knight to c6. So I'm going to attack both of these pawns. So if you move this, I'm going to take that pawn, right? And if you don't move it, I'm going to take that pawn. So knight to e3, I take queen to c2, threatening that pawn and threatening the knight. So I play queen to e4, just guarding everything. If you play knight takes f5, I'm going to take your queen. And if you do nothing, I'm going to trade, and I'm going to take that extra pawn. So after queen to b3, I'm thinking, oh, do I want to keep this pawn? Is that what I want to do? I'm like, nah, I'm going to play a4. I'm going to play a3. And I'm going to go for everything I can. Because the queen on e4 is very powerful. If you play something like queen to a6, I'm going to play queen to b1, king g2, and a2, right? I'm going to promote to queen, and I am going to be dominating the field. But I have to find out what else can I do, right? I just think in this position, my pass pawn is so dominant that this white queen has to tie itself down to this pawn that I'm just going to be creating so much play. In addition, I also have this pawn to take. I can play knight to f3 and just create some chaos on this side, So queen to b3 happens. Great move by Anton. And I play queen to b4 because what I want to do is queen takes, knight takes, and if knight d1, I'm going to play a2. If knight c4, I'm going to play a2. There's no way of this knight coming back to c2 because I just take it. So queen to c2 has to be played, and I play knight to d4. Now I think this move is great because number one, most importantly, it protects this perpetual sort of thing. So what I'm trying to say is usually they have this perpetual, right? And if you play g6, bam, bam, and queen to f6, and there's usually a perpetual. But in this game, queen takes f5 is met with knight takes f5. So this knight plays a very important role in preventing the draw. So king h7, knight takes f5, and now queen to b1. Queen takes f5. The knight's still protecting it. The passed pawn is still there. Queen to c3, and now queen to f3. Just wrap it up. I know I can play queen to e4, and I can say, f3, queen to e2, king h3, knight takes f3, go for this pawn, go for this pawn. I know I can do that, but I just wanted to keep it clean, right? Queen f3, trade queens, play a2, get the queen, roll with it, go for checkmate, and finally get the checkmate. So this was a complex game. It was not easy for me, right? But I was able to, from the wing gambit, I was able to develop some things. Now, I don't know if this trade on f5 was beneficial because I personally felt that, the bishop on d3, it has a lot of potential. It can swing over to a4. It can just keep watch on this h7 pawn. There are so many ways to think about it. But after this, I was able to find some ways to bring my pieces out. I think c4 just came a bit too soon because I had this move bishop to b5, right? So I think one thing to think about is just moving the rook e1, right? Or this, or just trying to find another way to guard this c4 push. Maybe queen to b3, right? Something like that. But I wouldn't say that c4 was the right way to approach it because I got bishop b5 in, neutralized this knight, and my own mistake was I should have played rook c8 or queen d5 instead of just trading right away. Because my bishop, if you look at it, it still has plenty of potential here. But I sort of was really sick of that knight, and I just was a bit impatient. Now I have to say, I gave my opponent Anthon2010 a chance to get back into the game with this move knight to c6. And although it may seem like, I'm getting to a5, it's also preventing me from doing the things I want. So um, this file is going to seem really, really vulnerable right now. So for example, if white just plays queen a3, keeps an eye on this a7 pawn, maybe in the future has some d5 thing, white's going to be great. Queen d3, I played b6, and here there's this d5 move. If you want to see why it works, you can look at my previous video and see me analyze it. But after rook c2, I was very glad to trade my pieces, and slowly I was able to improve. I was able to gobble up some pawns, find some tactical findings, get my knight to a dominant square, get the knight, trade, and checkmate our friend Anthon2010. Let's get into the next game. It was also very complicated, but this was an English opening. c4, e5, knight c3, c6. So this was the same thing that none other than Annie G001 played. Same system, knight f3, queen c7, d4, and now d6. And now I played g3. I said I want to avoid, the bishop trying to guard these pawns. I want there to be a backdoor and maybe something different, right? And here after e4, I was already out of my territory. I didn't know whether I should go to g5, whether I should go to h4, or whether I should go to d2. And ultimately I settled on d2, but I think knight g5 was very tempting because I saw d5, and then I said, what about bishop to f4, right? But then I looked at bishop d6, and after bishop takes and queen takes, I felt like the knight would have been a little misplaced. Obviously, I could have thought about f3 here, but I just wasn't sure, right? So I decided, to not crowd the pieces, I'm going to play knight d2. If you play d5, I'm going to play takes, takes, and the move knight to f1. So I had so many ways to think about here. I could think about f3, but I don't think that thought ever popped up to me because I truly believed that I could get my knight to e3, put some pressure on d5, and really try to break down the wall from the root being d5. So I really wanted to do that. And in hindsight, when looking at right now, I should have played queen to b3 right away, or I should have played f3 right away, because I looked throughout the game and just knight f1 was just too slow. Even though I had bishop to f4, even though I had knight to e3, it was just a little bit too slow because black could probably just play bishop e6, and to be honest, the knight on e3 then if it doesn't have anything to do on d5, it's probably going to feel very lost. But I continue with it anyway. After bishop b4, I play queen a4, knight comes out, and knight to e3. I could have also played bishop to g5 here, but I don't think I remembered to do that. Bishop to g5 threatening, bishop takes, removing a defender of the d5 pawn, getting my knight to e3. I think that would have been a pretty good continuation. But I played knight to e3 first, bishop takes, pawn takes, castles, and castles. So now I've sort of felt like the previous anxiety to really find where my pieces are going, it's sort of disappeared. Because to be honest, I've seen that my bishop can thrive on a3. I've seen that my knight is okay on e3. It helps really keep an eye on d5. And I guess the only thing in this position about that's bad is probably this bishop, because the bishop is not doing anything right now because it's being blocked by the two walls, but that's okay. Bishop d7, saying, maybe there's a discovery. Maybe I'll play knight to e5 and knight to c4, but I wasn't afraid of it. I played bishop to a3. Go for the rook. Rook to c8, rook to c1. I still saw no effective way of going to exploit this discovery. If knight here, I play queen takes. So our friend Anthon2010 played knight to e5. I played queen back, and now knight to c4. So at this point, I could see that Anton was definitely grabbing the upper hand, because it was clear I wasn't making much progress with my bishop like I intended to. So I should have played f3 earlier, but now I just wasn't getting the activity that I wanted to, right? e3, and now this was the move that gave me the light. Queen takes b3, a takes, and all of a sudden, there's so much good to my position. Number one, the rook has a sight down the file. Number two, the bishop can relocate this way and play c4. Just everything is coming to life, right? Initially, the queen had a blockade over this very weak c3 pawn. But by removing the blockade, now I'm able to play c4 myself, and suddenly there are so many opportunities. I play bishop to e7. I want to go make fun of this knight. The knight, it's placed in an okay spot right now, but I kind of feel like I moved it there just to give my rook a vision down the a file. Knight to d7, very good move. Now I play bishop to b4, and to be honest, I could have played c4 here and tried to already undermine the center, but I wanted to back my bishop out to keep it safe, just in case of f6, king f7, the bishop might look really clumsy in the center, so I want to move it back to b4. I guess another reason was because I wanted to prevent black from playing a5, because I kind of felt like, if the pawn's on a7, it's going to make for a better target down the a file. And if b6, I'm going to play c4, because if takes, I'm going to take on e4. I'm going to direct my attention toward this rook. The rook comes to b8, and I can think about bishop d6, trapping the rook, or I can think about taking on a7, right? Or I can play d5. There are so many things to think about. So obviously, our friend Anthon2010 can't open that gate. f5 happens, very good move, and I play bishop to f1. I start to slowly improve my position, and now is the time where I say, okay, well, if pawn takes, the knight is going to take, and probably black's going to be the one with the upper hand, so I need to go for something else. I play c5, I bring my bishop, I cement it on a very good square. At this point, I could have also considered pawn takes c5, given that this is a really powerful pass pawn, but I didn't. So I'm going to leave the next part of the game in the next video, and I'll see you next time.